Hi everyone, this is Heather Lautinen from the Flourish Academy. This is episode 480. Today we're talking about non-paying clients, which is less than ideal. But before I get to a specific situation that one of my friends is dealing with right now, I want to talk about the different pricing models and how you might have this structured. Let's first start by talking about wedding photography. So in terms of weddings, you should be paid in your entirety upfront prior to the wedding. So the way I have my prices established is that you pay $1,000 in order to retain your date. Your date is not secure until I have received the non-refundable retainer and a signed contract. Then the remaining amount is divided into two payments, 6 months prior and 1 month prior. So therefore, I am paid in full prior to the wedding, which is how I like it, because then there isn't any pressure on me or the client. They're paid, they've already picked their package, it's done. Now, portrait photography can be a little bit different. There are some portrait photographers who have, depending on their model, whether it's shoot and burn or their collections, there are some that are paid completely upfront. So they have maybe collections that the client chooses, or they do the shoot and burn. It's just a flat fee. They get paid upfront prior to the session. I would always recommend getting paid prior to your session, but understanding that there are some photographers that have a creative fee or a sitting fee, and then they get paid when the client chooses a collection. So they would be paid their sitting fee up front, and then the client chooses the collection and then pays for that. And there are various ways that you can approach that as well. For instance, you could have minimums that they have to pay ahead of time. That's up to you. But in this particular case, what happened was the photographer has a creative fee and then the client chooses packages. Well, this client is a friend of hers, and this is always when we tend to bend the rules a little bit. So she had paid her creative fee, but she had not paid for her collection yet. And part of her collection included the digital files. And because they were friends, my photographer friend was like, okay, well, here are your files that you are paying for, and here's the link for payment. And guess what? She has not yet paid for her collection. Okay, of course, my friend understands her role in this. You should always receive payment before delivering any type of product. So what she should have done, and again, she knows this, is she should have said, here's the link for payment. When she received the payment, she could deliver the files. In that collection, I believe there's also some tangible prints, so she had to place an order, or she needs to place an order for that client, but she should have waited and literally not done anything or delivered anything until she received payment in full. But she was like, oh, it's a friend of mine, here's your digital files, and you need to pay. And she hasn't paid. So she asked me how she should approach this. Well, of course, a friendly reminder, a professional email. She may just be busy. She may have forgotten. It could be no big deal at all. She just needs to be reminded. Moving forward, we won't let that happen again. But also, I advised her not to work on or place any further orders related to that client and that collection until she is paid. So I can't remember what was in that collection, whether it was an album or wall art, but I would order nothing, obviously. Because if she ordered something and the client ends up not paying at all, then she is going to be out that money. So I said to her, just gently remind the client, and don't work on anything until you receive payment. Now, if you gently remind the client and you still don't hear anything, then on my second reminder, I would say, hey, just FYI, I haven't placed your order yet until I receive payments. Now, the way I handled album sales, because albums were separate for me, is the client had to pay 50% of the album, the deposit, for me to begin the design, and 50% in order for me to place that order. So I would never be out any time or any money. Always paid on the front end. And we've talked about clients in the past who have not paid and how to handle that. Thankfully, in 16 years, I have never had a client miss a payment or not pay, unless they were, forgetful and I reminded them and then they sent it in. It was no big deal. But I never had a client not trying to pay. So this wasn't an issue for me. It has never happened in 16 years. Why? Did I just get really lucky with clients? Or is it maybe that I had pretty strict processes in place where I would not allow it to happen? That being said, I did have a policy for if someone did not pay their final payment 1 month prior to the wedding, because I'm often asked, what would you do if you had a wedding scheduled and the client was not paid in full? I would absolutely shoot that wedding, especially considering they have already paid 2 payments. So if they paid the retainer in their 6 months and they're late or not paying their final month, I would absolutely shoot that wedding. And I absolutely would not touch those photos, edit, post any previews, nothing until I received that payment. Again, I had that process in place. Thankfully, I never had to enact it because it never happened, but I would have things like that spelled out ahead of time so that you don't find yourself in these situations. Now, the good news is whenever you have something like this happen, instead of feeling like, oh man, this is such a bummer and I don't want to deal with this and this is awkward because this is money. None of this is awkward to me. None of it. It's all just business. And when something happens that you would consider less than ideal, I want you to reframe it and say, good, because it will never happen again. I've learned my lesson. I'll institute new policies or processes, and it just makes me a better business person. I hope that you found this useful. I'll see you in the next video.